Instead, it's the realization that freedom is not a state of being, but a continuous activity. It's the daily, mindful effort to identify those subtle pressures and make a slightly more conscious choice. We start to see that our power lies in the tiny negotiations, in choosing a different word, in opting out of a superficial competition with a colleague, in consuming media critically rather than passively. We stop looking for a grand battle to win and start engaging in countless small acts of micro-resistance. This is how we fight back in a world where power is diffuse. It's less about smashing the prison walls and more about learning to pick the locks on our own handcuffs every single day, through awareness and deliberate action. The goal shifts from total liberation to a greater degree of autonomy within the game, and ultimately to changing the rules of the game itself from the inside out, one thoughtful response at a time. Through this discomfort, we begin to see the faint outlines of a new path, one that isn't paved with the certainties we once clutched so tightly. It feels shaky, like stepping onto a boat after a lifetime on solid ground. But there's a curious sensation of lightness there too, a hint of possibility that wasn't present before. This isn't about replacing one set of rigid rules with another. It's about learning to walk without the heavy, ill-fitting shoes we didn't even realize we were wearing. We start to question not just what we think, but why we think it, peeling back the layers of influence from our upbringing, our culture, and the subtle, constant hum of societal expectations that have shaped our inner narrative. It's in this quiet, sometimes unsettling space of questioning that the first real seeds of a more authentic self begin to sprout. As we sit with this uncertainty, a shift starts to occur. The world doesn't change, but our relationship to it does. We might notice that daily decisions, the ones that used to tie us in knots of anxiety over choosing the right thing, begin to come a little easier. It's not because we've discovered a magic formula, but because the paralyzing fear of being wrong, of not meeting some invisible standard, begins to lose its power. We start making choices based on what feels right and true for us in the moment, rather than what we imagine is expected of us. This isn't a sudden transformation into a perfectly decisive person, but a gradual unwinding of the need for external validation. We learn to trust the quiet voice within, the one we often talked over with logic and shoulds, and find that it's been a pretty reliable guide all along. This process of internal realignment has a funny way of filtering out into our everyday interactions. Many of us notice that old frustrations, the petty annoyances and triggers that used to spark a disproportionate reaction, simply don't bother them as much. The driver who cuts us off, the long line at the grocery store, the critical comment from a relative, these events don't disappear, but our emotional response to them is no longer on a hair trigger. It's as if we've created a little more space between the event and our reaction, a buffer zone where we can choose how to respond rather than being hijacked by habit and emotion. This space is where our newfound agency lives. We realize that our peace of mind was never contingent on the outside world behaving perfectly. It was always about our internal relationship to the chaos. This isn't to say that the journey is linear or without its setbacks. There will be days when the old patterns feel comforting, and the new way of being feels terrifyingly vulnerable. We might catch ourselves slipping back into people-pleasing, or seeking approval, or trying to control outcomes we have no power over. The key isn't to judge ourselves for these moments, but to simply notice them with a gentle curiosity. Ah, there's that old habit again. Interesting. This compassionate observation is itself a profound act of freedom. It means we are no longer completely identified with every passing thought or feeling. We are the awareness behind them, the one who gets to decide which ones to engage with and which to let float on by. Together, we discover that this entire process is less about building a new, perfect self, and more about returning to the essence of who we always were before we started collecting all the rules and roles. It's an excavation of the authentic self buried beneath years of conditioning. And what we find there isn't some grandiose finished product, but a wonderfully imperfect, curious, and resilient human being. We find a capacity for joy that isn't dependent on circumstances, a sense of compassion that extends inward as well as outward, and a quiet confidence that comes from knowing we can handle uncertainty because we've been doing it all along, just without giving ourselves credit for it. This journey brings us to a point of profound understanding about the nature of freedom itself. It's not a destination we arrive at, but a continuous practice, a muscle we strengthen with every conscious choice. The French philosopher Michel Foucault spent a lifetime examining the structures of power and control that shape human existence, both from the outside and, more insidiously, from within our own minds. He arrived at a powerful and deeply human insight about what it means to be truly free. He suggested that real liberation is found in the critical scrutiny of these very structures, and that the ultimate freedom feels less like a triumphant conquest and more like finally taking off shoes that never quite fit. It's that deep, relieving exhale after a long day, the simple, uncomplicated comfort of standing on your own 2 feet, feeling the solid ground beneath you, and realizing you can now walk your own path, in your own way, at your own pace. It is a gentle, quiet, and profoundly personal revolution.